Yeah. You can hear me, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. You may start, Maharaj.
Yeah. Om Murmardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum. So we were discussing the Vibhuti Yoga, and we had discussed in our previous class verse number 21. So we begin with verse number 22. As we discussed last time in our previous class, Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna that I'll give you a glimpse. Of course, he first gives him the subtle eyes to see the Vishwarupa. It's not possible for anybody and everybody who is an aspirant to see the Vishwarupa of the Lord, the cosmic form of the Lord. So one needs a special kind of intuitive vision, and that happens by the grace of the Lord. When that intuitive vision is given to the aspirant, he can see the cosmic form of the Lord. So the cosmic form, of course, the cosmic form, part of the cosmic form, a glimpse of the cosmic form is only possible because the entire, the whole cosmic form as it is, his true nature cannot be conceived even through the subtle eyes. It is a transcendental experience which happens only when you go beyond the mind. So what's the function? What's the purpose? The Lord very clearly says, I'm giving you a glimpse so that you can use that as a meditation to think about the transcendental aspect of the Lord. It will lead you to the transcendental aspect of the Lord as you have a doorway. Every house has a door through which you enter. So there are many doors. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, every house has many, a big mansion has many doors. You can go through any doorway. So these various forms, the cosmic, the different qualities the Lord possesses, the different forms that is going to exhibit, they are, you may say, a few samples of the infinite variety of forms in which the Lord can manifest himself. So that even a small variety, a small glimpse, as Sri Krishna says, I'll give you how I manifest myself more and more through the species in which some kind of excellence is found. In every species, in every type species that exist, living and non-living, inanimate or animate objects that you see, it is known as Bhuta, Bhutanam. So when we come to that, Bhutanam Asmi Chetana. So Bhutana means all that exists. So what exists can be animate, can be inanimate. It can be inert matter. In fact, from the ultimate point of view, everything exists, has the nature of Satchidananda. So we will discuss that point. But before that, Sri Krishna is telling him, I'm just showing you some samples of my infinite glory, the infinite glory of the Lord, which manifests itself in the best among all the different species. Of course, it's impossible to cover all the species, but he's taking some important species like plants, animals, the reptiles, and then who is the king of animals, the king of reptiles, the king of plants, and like that. He is trying to express, if you meditate on those, because they have some wonderful qualities, and if you meditate through that doorway, it's easy to reach the transcendental aspect of the Lord, which of course cannot be understood by the mind. Even the subtle mind, the subtle vision cannot reveal to you the true nature. It has to, one has to just realize it through a kind of intuition which is beyond the body, beyond the mind, and beyond intellect even. So that is the transcendental experience. That is not what is spoken of here. Here, Sri Krishna wants to tell Arjuna, give him a various meditation with form, by meditating on which he can hope by the grace of the Lord again to touch or to reach the formless. So now he comes to verse number 22. Before that, we saw Maruts, the different kinds of wind and other things. They're all representatives of Ishvara, as we saw. The sun becomes the luminary during the day. The foremost among the luminaries during the day, the luminous objects that you see, there cannot be anything brighter than the sun during the day. And of course, at night when the sun sets, moon is the brightest among all the luminous bodies. So we ended with that. So these two heavenly bodies are just a sample, and they are viewed with veneration. That is the greatness of Indian culture. Anything that is Sreshta, Sreshta means great. So Sri Krishna used to visit great people, great scholars, great pandits, or even great spiritual giants, anybody who had a special talent. He even went to see a great wrestler, because he found that the power that a wrestler has, a very famous wrestler. So and a great musician, a veena player. And he went into samadhi when he heard the notes of the veena played by that person in Banaras. So he had that desire to see, because the creation, the representatives of Ishvara are manifest more in this the greatest among the species, a particular species. Just as we see among the lions, we have, among the animals, we have lion. Lion is known as the king of the jungle. There is a reason why he is considered to be the best in that particular species. Not that God does not exist or pervade other beings. He pervades. But among them, if you meditate on that which manifests the glory to a larger extent than the other in that particular species, then you get a hint. You always have a positive attitude towards life. You see, first the Lord is training Arjuna to see everything from a broader perspective. If you have to see the best. As Sri Krishna once said, you go to a king, you don't ask him for pumpkins. You ask him for whatever the highest treasure he can give you. You seek that. You don't go to ask for vegetables or some simple thing from the king. He can give you much better things. So also here we have to approach. When we approach the Lord, we have to see him in the most glorious thing that is there in front of our eyes. So that with that idea of the vastness, the veneration that we show for even these temporary objects or temporary animals or temporary natural phenomena like the sun, moon, so even they become venerable. And that is how you divinize your entire life. Anything that you come across, you try to see the divinity in that. You begin with the best of the species. Then, of course, as your vision purifies, as your vision becomes clearer and clearer, you see in lesser beings also. He's not saying, he's in fact clarified this fact. Ishvara sarva bhutanam rid deshe tishtati. I mean, the Lord is in the heart of all bhutas, not necessarily the Sreshta, but the great ones, the best among the species, is a bigger window. So through that, you get a glimpse of the glory of the Lord. So that's the idea. So we come to verse 21 ended with the veneration people show to the sun and the moon. When we see the sun and the moon, it's a daily occurrence for most of us. We see the sun, we see the moon every day practically, unless there is this Amavasya day when we don't see the moon. But still, whenever we see the sun, whenever we see the moon, we try to think of the glory of the Lord. That is its spiritual benefit. Otherwise, these are meditations You may call them lower meditations. They're not meditation on the transcendental aspect of the Lord, which may be very difficult in the initial stages. But nevertheless, they give you an idea and develop an attitude within you, within all of us, the spiritual aspirants, that you look for the highest. Don't be satisfied with the lowest. Whatever you do, you try to be the best in that. If you are becoming a spiritual aspirant, just don't be lukewarm in your approach to spirituality. You try to let others do whatever they like, but you try to be the best among uh, your species. So if Narendra, in fact, the name was given to him. So Sri Ramakrishna used to also say, he is the best among men. He is a very superior kind of person. The name itself was justified. Nara Indra, Naranam Indra means among all the Naras, among all the men, he is like a lord of all the men. He is the highest manifestation of the masculine personality or human personality that one can imagine. So he used to motivate people. That is how our scriptures motivate people. When we always constantly meditate on the greatest aspects or manifestation of different species, that helps us to always keep our sight very high. You see, that's why uh, this positive attitude is very helpful, especially in spiritual life. When there is a tendency to be lukewarm, when we have depression, our minds become depressed, we have to raise our minds with our own effort. Raising the own mind with your own mind, with the self. Raise the self by the self. That is what it means. By the higher mind, you will raise the lower. It's always the subtle that helps us to raise the grosser things below it. So the more subtle the vision, the more the greatness or the glory of the Lord is manifest. If you meditate on that, you are in a position, whatever species you belong to, or whatever species you are meditating on, you get a feeling that this is the greatest. If somebody can be great, even I can be higher than uh, other human. I did not be like an ordinary human being. I don't have to lead an ordinary life. Everybody does that. But not all animals are like lions. So that is why this glorifying the best in Prakriti, if that becomes a habit in us, then we'll not settle for anything less. We will not settle for becoming an ordinary aspirant. If I have to become a sadhaka, if I have to become a rishi, let me become the best among the rishis. So you'll find the best among the rishis, the best among the gods, the little gods, best among the maruts. You will find so many things will come. As and when the examples are given, we'll try to explain what it is, because these are just samples. Now we come to the Vedas. So all of you know that there are 4 Vedas. So in our culture, the 4 Vedas, they are considered to be sacred. But even among them, there is a gradation, or maybe Sri Krishna is making a distinction here. Though the ideas, you will find wonderful ideas in all the 4 Vedas. But for a special reason, among the Vedas, Rig Veda, you have Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda, and Sama Veda. But among Vedanam, Samavedo Asmi, Samavedaha Asmi, means among all the Vedas, among the 4 Vedas, of course there are 4 Vedas, of course there are subsidiary Vedas, which are also known as Vedangas, science of pronunciation, Shiksha, the science of astronomy or astrology, which is known as Jyotisha. These are grammar and all those things, they are Nirukta and all those things are ancillary. They are also Vedangas. They're part of the Vedas, but they're not the main Vedas. The main Vedas can be classified into 4. Rig Veda, Yajur Veda. Many of the mantras are common to all the Vedas, especially Sama Veda. But here the Lord says, Vedanam Samavedo Asmi, Samaveda Asmi. So why does he say that? We'll come to that. Let us read the whole verse now. Devanam Asmi Vasavaha. So among all the Devas are bright beings. They represent certain powers. You see, when you uh, utter the name of the Deva. As you know, in the Mantra Shastra, we'll come to that also. Among the names, I am Om, and many things will come now. But in the Mantra Shastra, there is a thing known as Bija. Each of the Bija represents a particular deity. Now, these deity are condensed powers, or they are condensed Shaktis. You all know when Shiva, when the Avyakta Prakriti manifests itself as the Vyakta Prakriti, they form power centers from which the power emanates. These are given the name of different devatas. And these devatas, each one has a unique bija. That is, each glorious aspect of the Lord has a particular bija. So what do we do now? Since the Supreme Lord, Brahman, has manifested himself, or you can say itself, it has no gender. Only when it manifests, we see in Prakriti these gender differences. But when you go to Brahman, he has no gender, because there are no two things, only one thing exists, the Supreme Consciousness. So we'll come to that consciousness also in the second part of the verse. But what I'm saying is that these devas, or they are deva, means it has come from the root div, to shine. They are shining beings. What do you mean by shine? It's not the physical shining like the bulb shining or the light shining. No, they shine by virtue of their purity or some kind of power that is packed in them. That is, they shine by virtue of their subtlety. They are subtle. So when you say the buddhi shines in the heart, what do you mean is they are less gross than our manas. It is a part of the mind, no doubt, but the buddhi is supposed, we say the buddhi shines. What do you mean? Is it something like physical light? Normally people associate shining with light only. No, it is not light. It is a revelation. It is an understanding, something which clarifies, something which shows us in clear light. So even when we use sentences, we say, oh, I can see it clearly. That doesn't mean he sees it clearly. It is very clear. The mental conception is clear. The idea is clear. So you use the simile or the metaphor of a light, that now the truth is shining. Truth doesn't shine like a bulb, but it has that power to reveal. That is what is meant. So devas are power heads. You can say they are centers of power, which reveal certain aspects of deity. So among all the devas, I am Vasava. What does that mean? We'll come to that. Indriya, and moreover, the power to reveal is power packed and is represented in tantras by bija. So the bija mantra in the mantra itself, Om is of course the pranava, the ultimate bija, which represents Brahman, Shabda Brahman. But these smaller devatas can be revealed through their grace. That power can be released. That is known as the bija mantra. So each devas, they are represented. Among the devas, I am Vasava. So we'll come to that. Then Indriyanam Manaschasmi. Among all the Indriyas, as I told you, we have 10 Indriyas, 5 Gyanendriyas and 5 Karmendriyas. But according to Vedanta, some schools also believe that mind is also an Indriya, because without the mind, eye may see, the light may be reflected in the eye, but it is not conveyed. No sense is made unless the mind is attached. It may be a lower mind, it may be a reactive mind, but some coherence is necessary. We see, we hear, but all these messages, when the mind is attached to the eye, the sense, the subtle eye means the eyes, the nose, the smell, and the sound, the ears. If the eyes or the mind is not attached, then even if we hear, we don't cognize it, we don't perceive it. So that is why the mind is also known as the 11th Indriya. Strictly speaking, there are 10 Indriyas. The 5 Gyanendriyas, sight, sense, smell, sight, sound, that is hearing and all those things. And karma indriyas, you all know, the 5 organs of action. When you see, perceive certain things, when you react, you use your willpower uh, to act, then the karma indriyas come into play. So 5 Gyanendriyas, 5 Karmendriyas are powerless without the mind. It is mind which is controlling them. So among all the 11 Indriyas, in that case now it's not 10 but 11. So among all the Indriyas, mind is the Sreshta, Manas Chasmi. So I am the mind amongst all the Indriyas. That is, I am the best among all the Indriyas. Among Devas I am Vasava and Vasava. And in Vedas, I am Samaveda. We'll see why these things have been chosen. And finally, Bhutanam Asmi Chetana. I am the Chetana, means Chaitanya. So among all the beings, you see, when you say being, you don't automatically think, don't infer that beings means living beings. No, Bhuta means that which exists. It can be a stone, it can be a plant, it can be an animal, it can be a human being also. So among all bhutas, I am the senses, I am the Chetana, Chetana. What does he mean by Chetana? I am the consciousness that you find. Here, he's not talking of the pure consciousness. You see, here consciousness is used in the lower sense, as it is used in the Western sense. When you say conscious being for a Western scientist, when you ask whether this particular object or this particular being, this particular is inanimate or it is animate or inanimate, you have to say that this is a conscious being because it has life in it. It is able to react. It has a quality of consciousness. So among living beings, I am the consciousness. I am the consciousness which animates the living beings. It is there, of course, according to Vedanta, consciousness is there, but it is not manifest. It is manifest more in living beings. That is why we call it as Chetana. Now that Chetana, if you see the famous Sufi mystic, Rumi said that consciousness is static in a stone, it is quivering in a plant, it is still there in the plant. As the modern research says, the plants are also conscious. They can feel pain, they can feel temperature, they can feel the heat, they can feel the cold. They react in different ways. They have a primitive mind, but still they react. So there is consciousness. So consciousness is quivering. It is not, it is static in a stone. So you don't see anything. It is static in a stone. So in a plant or a living being, or it is slightly, it has a slight motion, whereas it is fully active in a human being or an animal, more than the plant. In the plant, it is restricted because the plant can just grow and do certain functions. It can't move. So consciousness in living beings, among the living beings, I am consciousness. Now, of course, here it includes the plant also, but that consciousness which is most manifest is the human being or animal living beings. So I am the consciousness, I am Chetana. So we're now coming to the Vishnu Sahasranama. You see why some of Samaveda is given importance. One of the names attributed to Vishnu is Samaga, which means the chanter, one who chants the Samaveda. Now, you all are familiar with the different Sahasranamas. There's Shiva Sahasranama, there is Vishnu Sahasranama. It is nothing but something similar to this Vishwarupa Darshana in verse form. In poetry form, you will find that Vishnu Sahasranama gives different names to Vishnu. Vishnu is one, the creator, but he manifests himself in various ways. That's why we have Sahasranama, 1,000 names. So one of the names of Vishnu is Samaga, which means the one who chants Samaveda. Why not other Vedas? The other Vedas, among all the 4 Vedas, only the Samaveda is set to music. Therefore, it is enchanting even to those people who don't understand the meaning. The Vedic chanting is good. The other Vedas are also chanted. but they are not chanted in a musical way. The Samaveda have to be chanted in a particular way which is pleasing to the ears. So though there is deep philosophy, Vedas are Vedas, whether it is Rig Veda, there are great ideas in all the four Vedas. But because of the way it is chanted, it is known as, it has been best set to music. So samas are normally sung. In Gujarat especially, there is a small district where the last remnants of the original chanters of the Samaveda were found. Recently, one of our initiated devotees, she had a project of the Indian Center for Cultural Relations, ICCR, where she was trying to write a thesis on the chanting or the music of the Vedas. The music which is associated, what are the different, so she had to record certain things. So after a lot of research, she found that there are only a few families left. It is such a pity that this great, she had to go to Kerala to visit some very poor families who, obviously it is not a, it's a profession which now is slowly going away. People are more interested in, so these people are very, very poorly paid. The chant, some Vedas, portion of the Vedas, in their pristine purity, is maintained in a tradition. It is coming down in an oral tradition. They don't refuse to write it or print it or read it. They have to hear it from their ancestors or their forefathers, and it has come down. There won't be a single mistake in the intonation. They have to hear it since childhood, and it has to be carried from generation to generation. Unfortunately, the families are becoming fewer and fewer unless somebody takes some efforts to preserve it. Now, of course, you can record them. At least some of the uh, temple trusts like Tirupati and all, they have managed to catch hold of these chanting people who could chant the original. I mean, they belong to a tradition. They have never allowed that unbroken lineage of chanting of Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, but Samaveda, when this lady came, she found that there's only one or two villages, Padadri in near Jamnagar, where some pandits, of course, obviously they are poor. They're poor because nobody cares for their knowledge. But somehow they have stuck to that tradition. And they in spite of great poverty, they have somehow maintained, they were proud of their lineage and they managed to preserve this. So to record this, I came to know after that, then I understood why Sri Krishna is saying in the Gita that among the Vedas, and the chanting was so beautiful. If you hear that, it's a divine kind of music. It has nothing to do with classical music. It is sung in a very particular way. And it has come, if you ask them, they say, we don't know, we are just reproducing what our forefathers did. We are just carrying on that tradition. So fortunately now we have the very good recording systems. At least posterity will have the benefit of all these recordings before they really die out. Many of the shakhas have the real chanters, the original chanters. If you remember, Swami Vivekananda helped Pandit Shankar Pandurang in whose house he was staying in Porbandar. So he had pandits. He was an administrator of Porbandar because the king was a minor. So in his house, one of the attractions, Swamiji never stayed in one place for more than few days. He was always wandering. But somehow, when he came to Porbandar and stayed in the house of this Diwan, who was from Maharashtra, originally from Konkan, and this Shankar Pandurang Pandit was a great Sanskrit scholar. So he had, and one of the main attractions for Swamiji was some Atharva Veda Pandits. This Pandurang Shastri, because he had the money and he was administrator, he could fund these people. They came from different parts of India, or wherever he found some Atharva Veda Pandits were there. He wanted a very authentic reproduction of this chanting. So he got them, and Swami Vivekananda was there when these people, there was one person who was known as Shruti Dhara. Shruti Dhara means he just remembers one, chants, hears it once, just once, and he can remember. You chant anything to him, maybe it is new. You chant that verse to him, and he will remember, and he will reproduce exactly what you said, whatever may be the verse. So naturally, his reproduction of the Atharva Veda was, in those days, there was no recording. Even unfortunately, Swamiji's voice and all, we could not get a recording. Had it been there, I think Shankar Pandurang would have recorded it. But anyway, he called the Shrutidhara who could recite from memory all the four Vedas. And he wanted the right reading of the Atharva Veda. So the Atharva Veda was, he recited it. Swamiji was lucky enough to witness the original chanting. And that original Vedas, the original Atharva Veda, was being chanted. And the Swamiji helped Shankar Pandurang Pandit to edit these Vedas. So much for this chanting. So Sama Veda, as I told you, only a few Pandits were there. Fortunately, it has been recorded. As much she could, she has recorded. And the sad part of it is that the institution or the organization which helped fund this, they were giving a paltry amount. Perhaps you would give more money to a laborer, to somebody who swept your rooms. He would get more money than this Pandit. Such rare things were vanishing. And this scholar told me that, Swamiji, I felt so bad to offer that amount that I had to offer from my own account. The ICCR, the funding agency, told me that we can't give more. He said, these people deserve, at least treat them as human beings, if not something. You are paying such a paltry amount to these people, and without them, this will vanish. So that is the sad state of affairs. Not only in other countries, we can't blame them, but even in India, where these chantings, these rare chantings, the last remnants, unless something seriously is done, these things will vanish. But anyway, the Gita tells us that Sama Veda, the pristine purity of the Vedic chanting, which the Sama Veda has preserved, they have to be sung in a particular music. And the children get up early in the morning, and their ancestors, their parents, who pass on this knowledge to them, they make them chant. If you go to these Gurukulas, these small Gurukulas, you will find how much they have to struggle to memorize these Vedas. We can't even memorize a few verses, a few poems, and we think we are educated. Whereas these young children, they get up early in the morning. There is a tradition. You go on chanting until you master it. Because if that lineage dies, the whole Vedas die. That is how they preserved it. Of course, you may say these things are there in books now. Max Muller and all have worked hard and they have put it in books. But what is in the books is something different. The oral tradition is something which is so rare that the oral tradition was the only way that this divine knowledge was transmitted. The oral tradition was the only way. So it is so unfortunate that in the name of modern education, modern technology, we have neglected these Vedas. So the Sama Veda, according to Sri Krishna here, is the best among the Vedas because it is set to music. It is enchanting even to those people who cannot understand it. Now forget understanding. Even the recitation is so rare to get. Even in a country like India, as I told you, nobody is prepared to fund that. And the state of affairs is so bad that our own heritage, which is dying day by day, it is just vanishing. We have money for everything else. Every stupid thing in the world, we spend money. But these poor people who have kept the tradition, 5,000-year-old tradition alive, they are still living. Some are living in Kerala, some you will find in Banaras, some are still living, as I told you, in Gujarat, the Samaveda Pandits. Even if you go to their houses, they are living in dilapidated houses, because people think it does not, it's not, the children also may be motivated to opt for other careers. So Sri Krishna is saying that this Samaveda, which is the best set to music, is the greatest among the Vedas. And that is why in the Vishwarupa Darshana, he says, in among all the Vedas, I am Samaveda. So the thought of God, the idea behind this 11th chapter of the Vibhuti Yoga, Vibhuti Yoga, the glories of the Lord, is through the glories we reach the Lord. Glories are not the Lord; they are aspects, they are trivial aspects of the Lord. He says, "You cannot fully understand my glory, but I am giving you the divine sight, with the help of which he's telling Arjuna, you will get a glimpse of my glory, and if you hold on to that, if you meditate on that, it will be a doorway to understand the real Ishvara, the transcendental Ishvara, which is the Lord himself is." So he says, for the time being, you be satisfied with what I am telling you about my glories. So the whole chapter is a kind of meditation technique given to Arjuna, who wants to know. In fact, he says, you would not have been able to even have a glimpse of what I am showing you without my divine grace. That's what Krishna is telling Arjuna, that it is by the Divya Chakshu, the divine sight, or the divine intuitive power I have given you, whereas all the people who are on the battlefield, except Sanjaya, who was recording all these things and explaining to Dhritarashtra, who was blind, they had the fortune to see this Vishwarupa Darshana. Whereas none of the others, not even the other Pandavas, who were in other chariots, they were just wondering what is Sri Krishna doing here. In fact, he was trying to show a glimpse of his glory, and Arjuna was trying to understand. Of course, how much he understood, we do not know, because after the end of the after the Mahabharata war, when Sri Krishna meets him, when he was quite old, and Arjuna was almost about to retire, he reminds Sri Krishna, he said, you told something nice in the battlefield. I have forgotten everything. So can you just repeat? He said, no, my God, I spent so much, 18 chapters he uttered. He was so inspired, he fought the war, he won. But such poor memory he had that he forgot everything. And then Sri Krishna had to repeat the whole essence of the Gita in a small work which appears in the Mahabharata as Anu Gita. He said, now there's no point in repeating what I told you. That has been lost. At least you remember this. That is enough for you. So his idea in this 11th chapter was that through this uh, description of the glories that he is doing, the verse 22nd we discussed. So through that, when you come across Samaveda, at least you know among the Vedas, this is the most glorious form, and in this, the Lord has manifested more. Now we come to the another name for Devas. You know, the king of Devas is supposed to be Indra. These are all part of mythology, but there's a great significance behind that. So among all the Devas, as I told you, the shining beings, Devas means those who enlighten us, those who are shining not in the sense of physical light, but the light of knowledge. That is the difference. Div means to shine, means the light of our knowledge, your understanding becomes sharper with the help of these deities. So this Vasava is another name of Indra actually. So Indra is supposed to be the Lord of Devas. Now we'll not go into the details of that, because that is part of our myths. And myths, though they have great meaning, now we are focusing more on the Gita. So we'll not go deeper into that, but you just remember the Lord of the Devas, the Lord of all the deities, smaller deities, is supposed to be Indra. So by sheer merit of his position, he manifests more of the Lord's glory. Of course, the Lord's glory is far, far superior than these deities. But at least among the Devas, among these species of beings which are known as Devas, I am Indra. So all these are all merits of God. Now, then we come to the senses. As I told you, Why mind is considered to be superior than the 10 senses? Among Indriyanam, Manas Chasmi, Mana Cha Asmi, means I am the mind. Though there are 10 Indriyas, there are 5 organs of perception, 5 organs of, as I discussed in this class, earlier, the 5 organs of action which we use. But they are useless unless it is connected to the mind. So mind is also considered to be an Indriya. That's why the functioning of the 5 senses become purposeless when the mind wanders away. You might be seeing that many times we do actions in a very unconscious way. So it doesn't benefit us at all. Perhaps we are reading a book but watching TV, we're trying to multitask, and our children have to spend so much effort because they can't focus their mind on the thing which they are doing. The mind is wandering somewhere else. So here Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna that if the mind is not there, if you that awareness is not there, then all the perception, all the reading that you do, all the listening that you do is all going to go waste. The colossal amount of energy that we expend or we waste, especially when it comes to educating children, the first thing or the most important thing is the art of concentration or awareness, which we don't teach. Without that, as Sri Krishna says, if the mind is not there, you may see, you may hear, you may taste, you may smell, you may do everything. Your senses may give you the best input, but you don't process it. You don't apply the mind to it. So the art of applying the mind to the senses so that some coherence is there, some meaning is there, and the children really learn in the real sense of the term. So the essence of education, according to Sri Krishna here and also according to Swami Vivekananda, is training of the mind or focusing of the mind or concentration of the mind. That is the last priority we have for our children. We help them to gather a lot of information, but unfortunately, we do not teach the technique of how to apply mind to these various inputs he gets. Throughout the day, there's so much of input given. The poor child has to is bombarded with so many things, so many various pieces of knowledge, and he is not able to piece it up together. And unfortunately, what happens that he doesn't know what to do with all that load that is on his poor mind, because the mind is not able to attach itself and make sense of the knowledge that is being given to him. So that is why Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna, among all the sense organs, you may have the sharpest sight, sharpest sense of smell, you may have the best input, you may be given the best amount of academic knowledge, but if you don't apply your mind to that, if you don't have control of your mind, you cannot focus on the subject that you are studying. No amount of knowledge that is given to you will stay, will become part of your personality. It will not transform you. So, Indriyanam, among all the 10 Indriyas, all the skills which are required, you need skills. What do you mean by skills? We have 5 organs of perception which give us inputs, and we use our willpower to act. We use the 5 organs of action to respond to that input. But when both these things happen, if the mind is not attached, Sri Krishna says everything is waste, complete waste. Because the mind is the sreshta. It is, he says, I am among all the indriyas, it is the mind. So if the mind is not there, if that mindfulness is not there, that is what we normally practice when you say mindfulness meditation. Are you mindful of what you are doing? Most of the time we don't teach the children. The education is so skewed that we don't teach him to be mindful. Swami Vivekananda himself said, I was a victim of such a stupid education. So if I had a choice, he says this in one place. He says, if I had a choice to educate myself again, say he goes to kindergarten and all the lengthy process that he was, unfortunately, he says, I went to university education, but my master was far more educated, though he never went to school, because he got the right type of education, and I, like a fool, just studied these thoughts without even learning to concentrate my mind. He said, first thing I would do if I had a chance to concentrate, to get my education again, to re-educate myself, is first learn the art of concentration. And after learning the art of mastering the mind, the art of focusing the awareness or the developing concentration, then I would use that tool, that mind, to grasp things and to learn things at a much faster rate, much better way, and much faster. That would have saved a lot of energy. And these words are coming from one of the greatest masters in meditation. So he says even his education was given to him in a wrong way. So you can imagine what is the condition of these poor children now, who are complaining there's too much of information and very little of concentration. And that doesn't form part of our education. So the ways of an absent-minded, you see, this is kind of, for the five senses are giving us an input, but our mind is always wandering and it takes a tremendous effort. That is why we get exhausted so quickly. The mind wanders, you put it back on the subject, it goes back up to some other object, and you take what would take normally 1 hour to learn, you are spending 4 hours to learn the same mathematics or some subject, which simple subject which you are learning, because your focus is not there. Mind, the moment it focuses, it goes away somewhere. And without giving him a proper tool to understand, the proper mind to understand, to mind to acquire knowledge, we are doing the reverse. We are putting the cart before the horse. We are trying to make him smart by giving him so many things, sending him to the best school possible. But we do not train him how to train his own mind, because that is the tool with which, no matter which school he goes, he can grasp things and make the knowledge useful to himself. So the typical case study is an absent-minded man. You say a person is absent-minded, he's seeing, he's doing many things, but nothing is registered. This position is very clearly explained, that if the mind is not attached to the senses when it is perceiving things, if it is not able to hold the mind focused on a particular thing, whatever it is doing, then that doesn't give rise to any kind of knowledge. It's just a waste of time and effort, and the poor child or the poor student has to suffer. So mind being the recorder of all the things that we do, it is so essential. So Arjuna is being told by Krishna that since you, in the 4th chapter, if you remember, he said, I find the control of mind so difficult. He was such a great achiever. He was a general. He could fight a whole army single-handedly. But even he says, my mind is wandering. And Sri Krishna explains to him how to control the mind. But here he says, I am the mind among all the indriyas. So just as if the mind is absent, the indriyas are of no use, so also the Lord is more manifest in the mind than all the indriyas. So that is how the vibhutis are explained one after another. So among all the sensations that come to the brain, the mind is that which is the greatest among all the. It's not the sight that you see, the sound that you hear, the taste that you smell through your tongue, which taste through your tongue, the smell that you get through your nose. All these inputs can be processed, can be understood, can be interpreted, can be analyzed only through a refined mind, which has to be first developed and then applied to all these senses. So the difference, now we come to the last. It says that among all the beings, I am Chetana or Chaitanya. What does he mean by that? Why Sri Krishna is mentioning that? There is consciousness according to modern physics also, this consciousness even in the inanimate object. Why single out animate objects? Why is a human being far superior than an animal or even a plant or the stones and other things? Every God is all pervading. But he says, I manifest more of that glory, just as Indra manifests more glory by being the king of the Devas. I manifest more glory through a conscious being. The difference between living and dead, for example, is the presence of consciousness. Consciousness as it is understood from the Western point of view. They think a dead man is not conscious, but according to Vedanta, everything, stone also is conscious. But here we are talking of the consciousness that is manifest. As I often repeat this, it's very important to understand this idea of consciousness. When you say, when the Sufi saints, they beautifully, as I told you just now, it's worth repeating again. Consciousness is static in the stones. It is still there. You can't say it's not there. But because it is static, it is not seen or it is not perceived. But it is slightly quivering. There's a beautiful Sufi verse which says that. And it quivers in the plants. You see some signs of consciousness, though we don't consider it to be as living as the animals, but still they have their life, they grow, they respond to pain, stimulus, everything. So that consciousness is slightly better manifest in the plants. But in the human beings, the pure consciousness is, more consciousness is found. That's why that forms the doorway to the ultimate consciousness. So as Swamiji says, every being is a temple of God. That is what Vedanta says. He is there in the heart of everybody. Arjuna was told in the 4th chapter. But why single out human being? Because more consciousness is manifested. So that's why he says, Swami Vivekananda said, among all the monuments, human being is the Taj Mahal of all temples. What he meant was, it is a supreme, it's one of the best temples where we can worship God. Of course, you can worship him in animals, you can worship him in plants and even in stones, but he is more manifest in the human being. That is what he means, that ultimate, the pure consciousness, which we try to see in the Ishvara. Through the Vishwarupa Darshana, you find in living beings. So among living beings, I am Chetana. So one who is conscious has more of God manifest. So just as we say that the wealth, the more, if you want to distinguish a rich man from a poor man, you say that a person who is more wealthy is a richer man than the other one who is poorer. So also the idea of manifestation of more glories in a particular species distinguishes them from the other rest of the species. And if you meditate on that, Sri Krishna says, you will get the transcendental experience of Brahman. Of course, these are my partial glories. This Chetana, this Indra and all the things which I referred to, they will just be a doorway through which you understand me in toto, fully. So before that, because you need something, some form to meditate on, you meditate on these vibhutis, the glories of the Lord. When you meditate on the vibhutis, a day will come when you will transcend them. Then we have the different other things. We have the concept of Rudras. Just as we have the Devas, we have certain beings known as Rudras. These are all part of mythology, but the idea is among the Rudras. In the Vedas, if you see, contrary to the Puranic concept of Shiva, Shankara, or he is the god of Rudras. So that's why this Rudra Prashna, Chamaka Prashna, which we chant in our Vedic chanting, we do that. It's that there, though it is addressed to Shiva, so that idea that Shiva is the lord of the Rudras. So that's why one of his names is Rudras. Just as we saw the different names of Vishnu, so also we'll see that among the Rudras, Rudranam Shankaras Chasmi, means among all the Rudras, there are lesser Rudras also. If you see the Rig Veda and all the Vedas, they begin with different worship of different forces of nature, whom they called Rudras. And among them, Shankara is the highest among Rudras. So Rudranam Shankaras Chasmi, then Vittesho Yaksha Rakshasam, means Yakshas, there's another being. There are so many categories. We'll discuss what it is. Vitesha or Kubera. Kubera is the god of wealth. You see, it's our mythology is so intricate. Sometimes we feel there's so much of confusion, especially, but everything has a particular purpose. One does not have to accept all these truths, but these form great metaphors for meditation. So when suppose a person is so much attached to his money, the idea behind all these deities whom we worship, many times Hinduism is criticized because they say, how many gods do you have? How many millions of gods? Every god. But we want to see divinity in everything. Every god or every aspect of deity is used to make you transcend them. Suppose for some reason a person is very greedy, full of desire for wealth. Let him be greedy, but a stage will come when if he meditates on Kubera, the lord of wealth among the yakshas, a day will come that through that door he will somehow go and take up higher pursuits in life. You can't expect everybody to go from kindergarten to PhD. You have to pass through all the stages. So there was something for everybody. So Krishna is now trying to satisfy the needs of people who are ignorant, who think the wealth is the most important thing in the world. So Kubera, they have formed this idea of Kubera. They say even when so many stories are there, they look insignificant. We think that these are all cock and bull stories. What do we understand? Why is there so much of confusion in these myths? But every myth is designed for people of lower understanding, of greed, of people who have greed, who have desires. Even they get a chance to lift themselves, think that there is something higher. We point out to something higher in a very, very gradual way, so that by meditating on this, even people who are so attached to money, even they, if they meditate on him as Kubera. So Kubera and all, there are many stories that he gave so much of wealth. That is why this Tirupati Balaji and so many things are connected with that. They say he gave a loan when Balaji was being married. So, and he's still repaying, that loan is being repaid. So anyway, these stories apart, the idea is that Sri Krishna or all our Shastras, they have only one purpose in mind. Take a man wherever he is. He may be at the lowest level, but let him rise from that. You rise from lower truth to higher truth. So they may look as, what is the significance of this Vibhuti Yoga? Can we not meditate on Brahman? Can we not become Advaitins overnight? But this Gita is not for one particular category of people. There are people with different needs, with different attitudes in life. So much of bondage is there. Let them give up a little bondage. If they think of one glory, the Lord says, I am giving you so many glories, Vibhuti. You take whichever Vibhuti you like of the Lord. That will help you in that. If you are attached to wealth, you meditate on this aspect of Vishnu, of Krishna, then you will find that slowly you will find that there are higher and higher aspects of the Lord. So Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna, for people of different mentalities, of different attitudes in life, they need this kind of training where they transcend the stage at which they are. He doesn't condemn anybody. That's why he tells Arjuna in some other chapter, don't disturb the faith, even of that superstitious person. See, he's struggling. He is definitely bound to the world, but a day will come when he will give it up. When he sees something higher, something better, something far superior. So that is the idea behind this Vibhuti Yoga. The Lord is not revealing all the Vibhutis. He says that I'm just giving a sample. I'm telling you those Vibhutis which will help you by meditation on which will help you to raise yourself from lower truth, from lower levels to higher and higher levels. So among yakshas and rakshasas, we'll discuss this in our next class. We are running out of time. So, and then there is, among Vasus, I am Pavaka, and mountains, I am Meru. So, as I said, the Rudras which we talk of, they are 11 in number, but among them, Shankara, or that is how the idea of Shiva has come. Among all the Rudras of the Vedas, there are so many Rudras, Veerabhadra and Girisha, and there are so many Hara, Pinaki. There are these Rudras. These are not just some names which have been given. They have some significance, but today we don't have time. So we will conclude now. Just we have to remember the essence of the Vibhuti Yoga. People think this Vibhuti, we go on chanting, we do all this Gita reading, and then, but we have to understand that Sri Krishna is making an effort here. And through Arjuna, of course, through Arjuna is trying to communicate through the entire world that no matter what your conception of God is, there is always a higher conception of God. And progressively you have to understand it, then transform yourselves gradually when you are fit, when your buddhi is developed, as he said, when the center of consciousness, which is known as buddhi, your mind is refined, then you get better and better ideas. But none of the earlier steps, when you go to study, do PhD or masters, you don't think that what you did in the kindergarten is insignificant. Without that, you would not have come to this stage. But people will be at different stages. So Vibhuti Yoga is one such chapter. Suddenly you will find the second chapter. First it starts with Vishada Yoga, where a kind of world weariness. Suddenly Arjuna is confronting problems. That is when religion begins. If you don't have problems, you normally don't come to religion. But in the first chapter itself is known as Vishada Yoga. So that Vishada was responsible to turn Arjuna towards spirituality. Then the second, he gives the highest philosophy of Advaita, of Sankhya. Then he goes down, he teaches Karma Yoga. Then again he comes to this Vibhuti Yoga. So there are different minds that whose needs are catered to, different aspirants at different levels of spiritual evolution. If you remember this, then Gita makes sense, Bhagavad Gita makes sense. So we'll continue. There's no time for question answers now. I'll take your leave. So Maharaj, shall I conclude? There is one question. Anyway, we'll discuss it next time. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanam